Joining me now to talk about this and the issue of the niqab in Canadian society is Amira El-Gawabi. Amira is with the National Council of Canadian Muslims. She's in Ottawa. Amira, hello to you.
Hi, Carol.
And also joining me is Shaheen Ashraf. Shaheen is with the Canadian Council of Muslim Women, and Shaheen joins me from Montreal. Shaheen, welcome to you.
Thank you.
Amira, let me begin with you. Do you believe a woman should have to show her face when she becomes a Canadian citizen?
Well, I think the courts have pretty much ruled on this issue now. Both the federal court and the federal court of appeal have said there is nothing to prevent a woman from wearing a face veil so long as she shows her identity before she takes that oath. There is nothing to prevent her from doing so. So the courts are pretty clear on this. The government is trying to get an appeal to the Supreme Court. We don't know yet if the Supreme Court will hear that case. But for now, it seems to be an issue that we can put aside for now during an election when there's many more very critical issues we all need to examine as a country. So I think that this is something that we can maybe talk about later, not now in the midst of an election where there are much more pressing issues that Canadians want to hear about.
But it really has seemed to have grasped Canadians' attention. I mean, Shaheen, let me ask you the question. What do you think? Do you think a woman should be allowed to cover her face when taking the Canadian oath of citizenship?
Well, I'm going to go with Amira. She's right in saying what she just said, and I agree with her wholeheartedly.
So you don't want to...
I think we're wasting a lot of time and taxpayers' money on this non-issue. Yeah. You know, we're hiding. I'm going to share this story with you because as I was driving to work, I was listening to The Current on my radio, and they said they took the, excuse my senior moment, I don't remember the name of the gentleman who said that, but he said when people are arguing and when you're losing an argument, you throw a dead cat on the table, and then the people start talking about the dead cat and forget what's really important. Yeah. So I'm going to bring you to that point that the niqab is the dead cat, and we keep talking about the niqab, whereas we're forgetting what the real issues are.
Yeah, but an enormous amount of people in the country actually agree with the Conservative Party on this. Amira, why do you think that is?
So for sure, the niqab is very unpopular. I myself don't wear the niqab. I personally don't like it, but my personal preference doesn't really matter. We live in a democracy. It's a place where people are free to wear and do what they want. I think we all cherish that. So do we really want to throw back to an era where father knows best and we're going to be told what a woman can or cannot wear? I think that's a very scary premonition. And if we really are worried about women's issues in Canada and women's rights, well, let's look then at the record. Let's look at the cuts that have happened to women's health care, to women's organizations across this country. The Status of Women of Canada has been cut in their funding. So there are real questions, the missing and murdered Aboriginal women. So if we really do want to have a discussion in this country about women's rights, why hasn't the Prime Minister agreed to discuss women's issues with a coalition called Up for Debate? He's the only political leader that refused to talk about women's issues in Canada. So I think that it's one thing to say I really care about women's rights and freedoms in this country. It's a whole other thing to avoid the real issues that impact day-to-day women and focus on a very tiny issue that is very unpopular, that captures people's imaginations, but at the same time, I do not think people are going to make their decision at the ballot box on this one issue. Okay. I think people are going to think about other issues as well.
Let me bring in why Jason Kenney from the Conservative Party commented on why the government is making an issue of this and why they don't believe a niqab should be allowed at citizenship ceremonies. Let's listen to what he had to say.
I think that it's completely wrong-headed to associate the niqab with Islam. The niqab represents a medieval tribal custom that reflects a misogynistic view of women. It is not a religious obligation in Islam. And to suggest otherwise, I think, is very problematic. I think we need to stop this association of this medieval tribal custom with a faith when the vast majority of Canadian Muslims do not embrace. In fact, they reject the misogyny that is implicit in the practice of the niqab.
Shaheen, what do you make of that? Jason Kenney obviously trying to say this isn't an issue about Islam or attacking Islamic women. It's about an issue of something that's non-religious. It's about something tribal and misogynistic. What's your response to that?
I think Mr. Kenny needs to know that dressing is a very personal thing, whether it's religious belief or not. I think it's a person's comfort level. You know, somebody will be comfortable wearing a bikini, somebody will be comfortable wearing a burqa. So it doesn't make a difference. You know, it all depends on your personal belief, how you think things turn out.
Yeah, I talked to a member of the Canadian Muslim Association, Women's Association, a few years ago. Forgive me if I haven't gotten the title precisely right. But she made the comment that she believed that the burqa, the niqab should be banned in Canadian society. And she said this on my program here. And she said, and I made that exact argument that you're making now, Shaheen, to her, which was, you know, we don't tell women how to dress, and you can wear a bikini, why not wear a burqa and niqab? And she said, no, in fact, we are not allowed to walk around in society naked, so why should you be allowed to walk around in society fully covered up? What's your response to that?
As I said before, it is a personal choice. It is really a personal choice. And it's not up to the government to tell us how to dress or how to undress.
And can I just
Nobody's talking
cut
about
in as
walking
well?
around naked. Nobody's talking about walking around naked, really. I mean,
Yes.
this is a clothed woman, you know, and the only thing is, the only difference is that she chooses to cover more than others.
And I think it's a question of the rule of law. I mean, are we going down a road in Canada where we are going to let ministers, you know, sort of make up policy on the fly based on their opinions? I think that is a far departure from living in a country that's based on the rule of law. That is what Canada stands for, actually. So whether or not Minister Kenny believes it's a religious practice or not, that's his opinion, and he's welcome to it. But in Canada, we have the rule of law, we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, we have guaranteed rights in Canada. That's what makes us proud to be Canadian. And I think that that's really under attack here. That's really what this is about. And I think that Canadians are seeing right through this for what it is, and that is a distraction.
Let me bring up what Tom Mulcair has to say. Let's play what he has to say on this issue.
I'm in agreement with the existing rule under which anyone seeking citizenship must uncover their face to identify themselves before swearing the oath in accordance with their religious beliefs. But if some of these women are being oppressed, we have to reach out to them, and it's not by depriving them of their Canadian citizenship and their rights that we can help them.
Shaheen, what do you think?
I don't know. Ministers are deciding what women have to wear or not to wear. You know, it's really a sad situation.
Okay, and Mira, what do you think of what Tom Mulcair's position is on this?
Right. Well, so I think that Mr. Mulcair, as well as Mr. Trudeau, have been taking a very principled stand, a very Canadian stand. They have been standing up for women's rights and freedoms in this country, and I think that that is principled. It may not be popular, but I certainly think that Canadians are not looking for politicians to bend with the wind and try to capture a popularity based on divisive politics. What they are doing is they're standing up for Canadian values that have been in place for decades and that we're very proud of. And in terms of oppression, of course, if any woman is being oppressed or being treated poorly or violently or anything like that, wherever she is, I think in Canada we have laws in place to deal with that. And I would ask the parties then, what is their position on supporting women's programs here? I think the question needs to be posed, and then we'd look at the answers and actually who's actually putting funding towards women's programs, supporting women's rights, supporting equal pay for equal work, for example, childcare, etc. So if we do want to have a conversation, then why don't we talk about real women's issues, not a few women wearing a face veil?
Shaheen, have you received a hard time for wearing the hijab since this became a big issue in this country?
No, not really. And I was telling someone earlier, you know, because I have been lucky, I've been blessed that I was never discriminated against, except one time when the CBC Current There was a big show, I think it was 2 years ago, and it was a live show that was taped, and a professor from Calgary was there, again a woman, and she literally said some very, very hateful things towards people who wear the hijab, and that was the only time I felt sad that in Canada I'm getting to hear this kind of flack.
And Amira, what about you?
So we've just heard here in Ottawa just yesterday a young 19-year-old disabled Muslim woman wearing the hijab was verbally harassed at a local mall. That comes just days after a woman in niqab was attacked in Toronto, which she mentioned, as well as a woman in Montreal.
What was said to the woman?
So the woman here in Ottawa yesterday, a young 19-year-old, she was at a mall, and an elderly male approached her and said, you know, get that effing thing off your head. She wore the hijab. Of course, she was very shaken. Her mother reported it to police. So certainly, and we're looking into other cases similar to that in other cities. So certainly there is a climate out there. There's almost a license towards allowing people to kind of air bigoted ideas or racist ideas here. And that's why we were calling on the Prime Minister, Mr. Stephen Harper, to condemn Islamophobia. He was asked by Rosemary Barton about these recent incidents against Canadian Muslim women. He was asked, you know, does he condemn that? And he did not. He did not step forward and really condemn Islamophobia. And we need to hear a very clear message from political leaders that hatred in any form against any group is not acceptable. We need to hear that loudly and clearly, particularly in such a charged climate.
All right, we'll leave it there. Almira Al-Gawabi with the National Council of Canadian Muslims in Ottawa, and Shaheen Ashraf with the Canadian Council of Muslim Women in Montreal. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you.